Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, June 10th City Council meeting. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernscher?
Here.
Next on the agenda is council preview for the next meeting. Mr. Trivett.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Our monthly operating report will be given by Finance Department, and under unfinished business, we'll be taking on a resolution regarding the support agreement and various documents for the bonding of the sports center by the HTRFA. Under new business, we have two budget amendments, a consideration to form or establish the formation of the Williamsburg Farmers Market Advisory Board as an official board and commission of the city, extension of the existing water agreement with the Newport News Waterworks, and the ordinance associated with the creation of the designated outdoor refreshment area, DORA, as we like to call it, for Merchant Square and downtown. And lastly, there's two items left, the consideration of a tourism promotion contingency application from the Advocates for a Live Performance Venue to do the necessary feasibility and economic studies for the facility. And then the last item will be consideration of appointment to boards and commissions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Trivett? All right. Takes us to public comment, which is an opportunity, again, for anybody in the audience to come forward, like to address council. Seeing none, we'll come back later. There's an open forum further down the agenda. Next is background presentations and discussions, and first is the presentation and discussion on cellular service study results. Mr. Barham, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of council. I'm here today to provide you with the results from the cellular service study that we commissioned several months ago. Spoiler alert, it's pretty much as bad as you already know it is, but we're going to walk through it anyway. So kind of a recap here, the reason why we kicked off and commissioned this study was generally just a lack of quality coverage across the city. The fire chief spoke to you about public safety impacts, service issues across every vendor that we have. Some are better than others, but slight. I think there's some ground being gained by the ones that we don't necessarily consider as being the best at this point. I'll remind you that the city switched from Verizon to T-Mobile in September of 22. We saw pretty decent improvements there, but we still have issues with that. And quite honestly, the last bullet there, the feedback, when I'm speaking with residents, generally speaking, if we're not talking internet access, we're talking cellular service and the issues that folks have. So it's a hot button item. So we proposed at that time a two-phase plan. I'm here today to talk to you about the RF propagation and mapping study. That is now complete. You'll see the results on a map here in just a second. The cell on wheels, a little bit different. The cell on wheels piece of this, while the cell on wheels itself is relatively inexpensive, relative being a key word there, about $30,000 or so. The cost to add carrier equipment to this cell on wheels is proven to be quite expensive, in the neighborhood of $400,000 per device. Now, the carriers have told us that they all have cell on wheels that they can rent to us or lease to us during certain key times. So we're exploring that. Doesn't prohibit us from going down the path of a cell on wheels. It would just be more Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi calling to kind of enhance those events for which they're needed. So the study itself, as you recall, we met with Crown Castle. They performed the study. A lot of the work had already been done within the city because William & Mary and Colonial Williamsburg had done the same type of work. We did focus on the three major vendors in the city, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T. You're going to see the presentation of the maps here in just a second. And then as a follow-up, and we'll talk about this a little bit more during next steps, but we could potentially partner with Crown Castle as a way to build out and boost that small cell infrastructure across the city that they would then manage and lease to the carriers. So without further ado, here's the first map. As it says across the top, this is Verizon. You'll see the legend across the top. We made it very, very big. This is all based on cell signal and that frequency with which they're operating at. So The map here, you can see the red is negative 125 to negative 100. An average is negative 100 to negative 70, and good is negative 70 plus. So lots of average here within the city, a few pockets of good, and then a fair amount of poor as it relates to Verizon. I will tell you that we kind of had to do an apples to apples comparison. T-Mobile specifically operates at different frequencies than the rest of these guys do, but we chose a common frequency among them. So when you see the T-Mobile map, it's going to not look near as good. It's a little bit misleading there, just so we can make this an apples to apples comparison. So that's Verizon as it relates to their cell service and what we found, or what Crown Castle found as part of this study. T-Mobile, you can see there that lots more red on that. Again, it's not near as bad as it looks. T-Mobile obviously not too thrilled with this map. They have seen this map. They're not too thrilled with it. However, I would caution that it's not near as bad as it looks with them. It has to do with the frequencies with which they operate and how we did this to kind of make it, again, an apples to apples comparison. I will tell you, based on personal experience with a T-Mobile phone myself, I have much better coverage and call making ability on that phone than I did with my Verizon phone. And then lastly, AT&T, lots of red along the bottom, a few pockets of green across here, but then, you know, just mostly average. All of this data, the plan is to build a web application, hopefully mid-July or so, where anybody can go in and punch in an address on that, and you'll get access to the raw data and be able to generally make a pretty decent assumption of which carrier would work best at your house based on the signal, or based on the quality of the signal as defined within this survey itself.
Probably a good idea just to mention that, you know, when you're thinking about cellular service, there's a lot that goes into whether or not your phone has signal or doesn't have signal, whether or not you have the call or drop the call. We've all certainly experienced that, no matter which carrier you have, driving along the roads and suddenly the call drops. And maybe that matches these maps and maybe it doesn't. When you're talking about propagation, there's so much that goes into it. It's very difficult to map it with certainty. And so what we don't want people to do is to see this and take away from it that this is the definitive answer as to whether or not they've got service at their house or they don't. This is just a component and a decent indicator, as Mark said.
Absolutely. So our next steps, as I said, we're going to meet with the carriers, discuss this with them, what their path is moving forward. I've already met with T-Mobile. Again, they're not too thrilled with the map. Certainly not thrilled with the map being public, but you know, we'll move forward with that. I have met with them. We're going to talk about their path and what their plans are to improve cell service within the city. I have met with Verizon. Verizon, while they're not very good right now, they have their own set of limitations. I have seen some of their plans, and if they're able to execute on all of those plans, I think it'll be a pretty decent improvement for Verizon within the city. AT&T, we don't really have a contact with them. It's not something not a carrier that we've dealt with much in the past. However, William & Mary and Colonial Williamsburg do. So the plan is to talk with them to get access to their reps so that we can meet with them and kind of walk through this with AT&T and see what their plans might be. Next, we're working with Crown Castle to finalize an agreement to allow them to attach infrastructure equipment to city-owned facilities. This would be kind of a general agreement. They would have to come back to the city every time they wanted to build some sort of infrastructure on a city-owned facility, that they would then lease that space out to the carriers, small cells, and then improve it wherever. That would all be done as part of either the carrier's master plan or Crown Castle's master plan as it relates to identifying, using this information to identify where they can kind of increase the quality of the cell service best across the city. And then last, the CIOs at William & Mary and Colonial Williamsburg We meet regularly. Besides internet service, cellular service is, again, a common discussion. So they have that same agreement in place with Crown Castle to attach, to build out the small cell infrastructure with them. We will continue to work with them so that we're not trying to duplicate efforts, but that we're doing things that support cell service across the entire city and ways in which we can improve it. So with that, that's the maps and that's the study, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barham. I guess going to the mobile cell tower, I appreciate hearing, maybe I heard it before, but it didn't set with me. But even if we purchased that, it's not going to be offering Verizon, T-Mobile, or the other carrier because of they would have to agree to put their.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that would just enhance the Wi-Fi. Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the other takeaways we want people to have from this particular work is that the city really has no ability to fix this problem. Our ability to even enter into this effort is limited by state statute as far as what we can do as a provider of such services. All we can really do is try to make it more convenient and less expensive for the carriers who are responsible for the service to address the concerns. And so the solutions that Mark's outlined, or the steps that we might take that Mark's outlined, are really both designed to address convenience and cost in the hope that the carriers will find it more attractive to come in and address it with that having been put in place.
I don't have to ask those questions because they're the answers. But, to me, this is the opportunity to partner with service providers, much like offering another opportunity like Go Fiber. It provides another venue for a distributor to come in and do something similar in a way. But I think to Mr. Trivett's point, by having this opportunity, this provider will put in the infrastructure, which then allows different carriers to put their hardware on these poles to offer different services, which is good. Why do you think these carriers haven't been making the investment in the area?
I think specifically I think T-Mobile has made a significant investment. Have they done everything they could? Probably not. Verizon, I think specifically, really got caught in the middle of executing a 5G plan as the pandemic hit, and they were fairly far down that road of really deploying 5G across the entire city and across their entire network. Then the pandemic hit, and everybody started working from home, and they had to essentially roll back years worth of engineering work to just kind of maintain the status quo and ensure the capacity was there. Once they got out of the pandemic, now they had to kind of work backwards from 2 years, so they're just getting really caught up. But I do think, based on my conversations with Verizon and some of the plans that I have seen, you're going to see a pretty decent improvement in Verizon within the next year.
Do you think they'll make this improvement absent this Crown Castle?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
bringing in Crown Castle won't impede their desire?
Absolutely not. It'll only enhance it.
Good, thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Barham. And just to add on a little bit to what Mr. Trivett said, I think the thing we also need the community to understand that is the city's it's not our responsibility to
Correct.
provide cell service. However, this council has made it a GIO initiative to try to do something to enhance the cell service. So obviously, you talked about public safety impacts. That hasn't made a difference to the carriers as well.
Correct.
But are there, and maybe this is for you or Larry, that are possibly there's some grant opportunities available for those cell towers based on the fact that it's impacting public safety?
I'm not aware of any grant opportunities. I don't know if Larry is or not.
Not aware of any at the current moment. Certainly it's something we continue to explore, but anything for the telecommunications, I'm not aware of anything specific that we could apply for now, but certainly something we'll take a look at.
Thanks. And then similar to the mayor's question is, I guess Crown Castle has some kind of confidence that if they came in, if the plan was to come in and add to existing towers, that the carriers would take advantage of that to enhance.
Absolutely. The Crown Castle's not, or any infrastructure provider's not going to come in blind and just kind of build it. They would have had.
Hoping that it's gonna
Yes,
happen.
absolutely. They would have already had those conversations leading up to this. So they would look at this data, they would look at Verizon's data, T-Mobile's data, whoever, and say, these spots are where we need to build infrastructure, and then sell the carriers on that. Once this stuff is in place, then the carriers could come in and do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just really have a nomenclature question, which hopefully this doesn't make me look too silly. But when you say the term small cell infrastructure, is that a general term that could be both something that is fixed and something that is mobile? Or does that have a meaning to those that are in the know as what is small cell infrastructure?
So small cell infrastructure is fixed.
Okay.
It's generally a smaller version of what you would normally consider the nodes
Okay.
to broadcast this. They can't broadcast as far
Okay.
because of their size, so hence you need more of those.
So it's more about addressing like a pocket
Absolutely.
of a place, but it's fixed.
Fixed.
So we're talking not just about, the investment in small cell infrastructure, which is a fixed thing to serve a pocket of a community that may have issues, but then also talking about mobile units that then the carriers can attach to any of them, because they
absolutely.
wouldn't be linked to Verizon or T-Mobile or whatever.
Correct.
And so those, to me, if it's mobile, it can serve the purpose of a fixed small cell infrastructure at a certain time, right? So
Correct.
if it's like, okay, we have an outage, some places, having a really hard time, then we deploy something mobile, but it may not be needed to be there all the time, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I was just wanting to make sure that I understood, like, when we were talking about this, we're really, like, looking at both what is on wheels and can go and can be a little more nimble, or if we have an event, a big
Absolutely.
event of some sort, or things that, once you put it in, that's where it's gonna
That's where
stay.
it is.
Okay, that was helpful, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and just to follow up on a couple things. So when you're saying fixed, I get that, whether it be on a pole or something, and then fixed on a mobile device. So once they would put it on the mobile device, they wouldn't take it off each time or in between events.
Correct.
It would be there for good.
It would be there
Or
for
for
the
the time
duration
being.
of whatever that time, but yes, it is in fact fixed to a mast on this cell on wheels.
And when you say that William and Mary and CW have an agreement with Crown Castle, is that the agreement where Crown Castle has negotiated with the carriers to place these small cell,
Yes, ma'am.
different places on campus or in the CW area?
Correct.
So they've already done that negotiation and already have, I assume, some kind of track record to see whether it makes sense for them to perhaps enter into a similar agreement with the city.
Absolutely.
And we talked about the different areas of the city. One place that I have always used to, while it was open, and will again, I imagine, have problems, is the Colonial Parkway. And since it's federal, is there anything that can be done there, or?
Probably not. You're probably hoping at that point for overlap from existing towers, depending upon where the towers are placed, for that signal to kind of mesh across the parkway itself. So no, the federal government's probably not going to allow a lot of
Right.
cell towers along the parkway for obvious reasons.
And what other question? Oh, so the map that you're talking about, obviously T-Mobile, you said it was apples to apples. So when you would sort of map this and put it out to the public, is there going to be a disclaimer, or would you modify it so that people get a more accurate representation?
I think what we would probably do is we could do both, probably. We could do a disclaimer on the map in terms of the frequencies that T-Mobile operates are somewhat different than what Verizon does. But particularly on the web application, we can use the T-Mobile frequency or the band in which they operate to say use this one and not try to make it necessarily an apples to apples, so that you get a truer representation of cell quality near that address that you're searching.
And I guess the last point is, in my view, if the carriers give better service, then that should translate into more business for them, which would be an easy way or an easy reason as to why they should provide better service. But we all know that our population doesn't provide them as much opportunity as a more urban area.
Sure.
So, all right, thank you.
I guess I'm following up on the business opportunity questions and ways that we can try to encourage that. Remind me, Mark, we, as a city, changed our telecom system from Verizon to T-Mobile,
Correct.
right? How many years ago was that?
2022, so a little
Okay.
over 2 years ago.
And is that a set 5-year contract, or is it considered
It's a 3-year contract.
permanent? Okay. I wonder if that could be in a year then on the negotiating table with T-Mobile and other carriers is, look, now we've actually got some information
Sure.
mapped out around what service looks like in the city, and it sounds like positive experience so far with T-Mobile, but it would certainly help out if they would also invest in this area too, for us to re-up with them.
Correct. Verizon has brought that up to me
Okay.
several times during our conversations about the work that they're doing ahead of
Yep.
any potential expiration of the T-Mobile contract with the city.
And then I'd have to think, you kind of joked a second ago, maybe some of them weren't super pleased that the maps are now public. That probably works in our favor, though, I would think, of people deciding which plans they should get and seeing atop a large section of some neighborhoods what it was seen when it was mapped as just red service in the negative, I think, 150 to 70
Right,
range
right.
for whichever carrier that was. So it actually feels advantageous for us to be talking about this and putting a report out or putting it on the website, because I think that actually work in our favor.
I don't disagree with you at all. I think that the carriers look at that and say that you can't argue with the data. The data is what it says it is. So I think the carriers can look at that and say, wow, here's some improvements we need to make, and kind of put that as far as their planning horizons for them to put
Yeah.
new equipment in use.
And then the data kind of on the nomenclature front is also the last question I had. The unit or the read of it being in the negatives, what is actually
It has to
that?
do with signal quality or signal strength.
Okay.
It's just a measurement of signal strength is all it is. So the more you get towards closer to 0, the better it is. So negative 70 is better than negative 125.
Yeah, but 0 is as high as you can go.
Yeah,
Is
but
that right? Okay.
that's like probably in some sort of really weird perfect world. So.
Yeah. We're not already operating in the negatives
No,
when you
sir.
can go to positive 70.
Right,
Okay.
no.
All right, well, I'm glad to hear the contract's up in a year, and maybe there's a chance there. But thank you for the presentation. This is helpful.
Good, and certainly, I think we all look forward to seeing that contract come forward. I guess that might require council approval.
I think so.
Yes, it does.
Good. Okay, thank you. I saw your hand. There'll be an open forum in just a few minutes, sir. Speak to that then. Okay, next is presentation and direction from staff on the initiative to improve 70% of the bus stops to the new standards of service. Ms. Griffin.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons and members of the City Council. Get to that. The city adopted the 23-24 goals and initiatives and outcomes in December of 2022. The goal to connect with the world is a call to leverage our strategic location on the interstate of I-64 to our economic advantage by expanding technology and infrastructure and ensuring the mobility of our residents and our visitors. To that end, you ask staff to inventory the bus stops in the city, to identify the needed improvements to provide each stop with a defined standard of service, and that standard of service would be each stop would have a trash receptacle, ADA accessibility, a shelter, and also a bench. You asked us to look at improving 70% of those stops to the new standard of service. So I will provide for you an overview of what we've done so far and get your direction on some other things and ask also and give you our staff recommendations. First, we'll start with funding. This project is in the capital improvement plan. It is scheduled for $275,000 in FY25. That was just approved. We also have $275,000 planned each year from FY26 to 29 for a total budget of this project for $1.375 million. I would be remiss if I did not mention the work that has been done by several people in the city and also an intern that we had with William & Mary. Seth Novak is now graduated. He graduated in May, but he called the office last year asking for an internship. He didn't care if it was paid or not. He just wanted to work in planning. So all of the work that you see here and the maps was because he went out and inventoried all of the bus stops in the city in the summer heat of 2023. Also, I would like to give special thanks to Harrison Williams, our GIS administrator with the city, and Katie Clark, also in the GIS office, and Michelle DeWitt. We all worked as a team to get this project to where it is now. So the first thing we did is coordinate it with WADA. So I also have to thank Ben Goodall with WADA. He gave us all of the information that we needed, and Seth had several meetings with him in order to go over some data that we received from WADA. We mapped the WADA stops in the city. We created a checklist of items to inventory each stop, and we inventoried the stops and then created GIS maps. So what we found out, there are 72 bus stops within the city. 10 of them are on William & Mary property, and 6 of them are in Colonial Williamsburg. So of the stops that are on city-owned right-of-way, it's 56 stops. So we'll be looking at these 56 stops. 70% of 56 is 39, so specifically to meet our goal, we're going to look at 39 stops that we should approve or move forward with. When we completed the inventory, what we found is that 14 of the stops of the 56 in the city have full amenities, and I've listed those there. 5 of the stops have benches and trash receptacles. Another 5 have trash receptacles, and then we have 32 stops that have no amenities. The one thing that we wanted to do was we had to decide how do we prioritize the stops that we should suggest should be funded. And so we decided on 5 factors. The first is ridership, the second, amenities, third, whether it was in proximity to a crosswalk, the function or the presence of a sidewalk, and also solar exposure. And then we created a scoring methodology, and this was really Seth's handiwork, and we worked with him on this. And when you look at ridership, what we did was we created points awarded for every 5.6 riders per stop, and amenities, it was 3.3 points inversely awarded. So if a stop received a 10, that really wasn't a good score. That meant there were no amenities at the particular stop. We looked at crosswalks, the proximity of the crosswalk to the bus stop. We also looked at the quality of the sidewalk, whether a sidewalk was present, and if it was, whether it was in good quality, bad, or non-existent. And then solar exposure. We wanted to see what the solar exposure was, if we wanted to have bus stops that were just solar, or bus stops that were powered by solar, or bus stops that just had a cover that were solar operated. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. So these are the scores that you could receive for each stop. An excellent score was 7.5 or above, and then you see the great, good, and okay. This was an exercise that we decided to do because really we came up with a formula. And this formula was based on daily ridership, the amenities, crosswalks, sidewalks, and solar exposure, these 5 factors. And the formula could be weighted with any of these factors. So I'll show you the maps in a few, but this first map you'll see we call the blue score. And this was the most equally weighted across values. And you'll see the percentages here. The green score then shows ridership emphasis. So we wanted to put an emphasis on ridership. So you'll see here 50% of the score, it was weighted towards ridership. The red score, the value was the experience of the person at the stop. And there you see you have 40% under daily ridership and 40% under amenities, whether amenity was present or not. And then you have the black score, which was the experience and the environment. And what that simply means is, how did the person experience, how was their experience at the bus stop, and then how did they actually, when they were walking up to the bus stop, what was their experience in crossing the street or anything like that. So there you have 30, 30, 15, 15, and 10. And here is the map for scenario 1. This is the blue scenario where the categories were equally weighted. And here is a list of the bus stops that received that 7.5 or higher score. I won't read through these because there's a lot, but you will see a pattern throughout this. The next scenario 2 was an emphasis on ridership. This just simply means that there's high ridership at these particular stops. This third scenario was an emphasis on stop experience, and this simply meant that these particular stops don't have amenities. And then this is an emphasis on rider experience and the surrounding environment. How you make your way to the stop, and also while you're at the stop, are you standing? Is there a bench for you? Can you put trash in a receptacle? Is there a shelter against any weather? Other factors that we thought you should also consider was accessibility and equity. Where were stops located? Were they located in areas where we could see that persons did not have access to cars or did not have cars? We wanted to make sure that we were equitable in looking at where we should put the funding for the bus stops. So, what we realized early on is that with having 32 bus stops that did not have amenities, we had to prioritize them in some way. And our prioritization may be different than how you want to prioritize, but what we wanted to do was at least provide you with some thoughts from staff. And so this first tier here are bus stops that had some amenities. And these are bus stops that had at least a trash receptacle and also a trash receptacle and a bench. These are a total of 5 stops. Here we suggest adding a shelter, upgrading the trash receptacle, and or upgrading or adding a bench. And then we thought we should also determine the level of ADA accessibility. I did not go through and show you every picture, although there are several pictures in this slide presentation. I showed you 3 of the stops in Tier 1. So this is a stop at Richmond Road at Peter Chang's. Here you can see the sidewalk is in good condition. We do have the right-of-way. The crosswalk distance is just 25 feet from the stop. There is a trash can and a bench. The average daily rides here is 56, and there was a high score for solar. We suggest putting a shelter at the stop. Here you have Capitol Landing Road near Econo Lodge. Again, you can see the sidewalk is good, the right-of-way is there, crosswalk is greater than 300 feet. There is a trash receptacle and bench. The daily rides are 70, and again, this one had a high solar score. So these first 3 that you'll see, it already has a space for a shelter. So we felt that we could easily add that within that $275,000 for next year. Here you have a sidewalk, you have right-of-way, the distance is within 100 feet of a crosswalk. The average daily rides are 56, and there is a high solar score. So what we thought we needed to do was the next steps for Tier 1 is determine if the city will continue to use the current shelter, trash receptacle, and bench design or adopt new designs. And I say this because when we first looked at this during the GIO session, we talked about whether we should use the designs for the shelters that we currently have, or if we should change to have a more updated design for the shelters. And so that is something that is a question before council. Staff would recommend that we do that and that we upgrade and change the design for the shelters. And we suggested soliciting the help of the ARB for that. We then would say move on to purchase the shelters, the trash receptacle, and the bench for Tier 1 stops as applicable. I then move on to Tier 2. This is where there are no amenities present. There are 32 stops in total. The reason why this is not in the first year of funding is because there are engineering and discussions that need to take place. We also need to consider the amenities that can be added, because there are some places where it does not appear that we have enough right-of-way to be able to have a complete shelter. So we want to have discussions with that and have some engineering done, so we did not want to put that in our first year of funding. And I will go through these, and I made myself a list so I would not linger long here. So here we have Merrimack Trail at Priorsly Lane. We also have Merrimack Trail at Colonial Pines. Richmond Road at Patriot Lane. This is North Henry Street at Highland Park. I did want to say this. We have been in conversation with the owners of Governor's Inn, the apartments, and WADA. Ben Goodall, we've met. And I think all of you were probably here when Governor's Inn, maybe Ms. Kearns wasn't, but at that time, Governor's Inn will be putting in a bus stop. I've talked to the owner, and they did not care where the bus stop went, so they are willing to put the bus stop and replace the bus stop that's here, either within Highland Park at Dunning, and we're looking into that now to see if we have enough space for that, right-of-way for that, or at the bottom of the hill. So this particular bus stop will be funded by a third party. We also have Richmond Road at Wawa. North Henry Street at Highland Park. This is going out of the city onto 64, so this is the opposite side of the road of the North Henry Street that I just showed you. Scotland Street at Tribe Square. Jamestown Road at CVS, and as you can see, mostly all of these do not have amenities. Richmond Road at Blow Hall. North Boundary Street at Merchant Square. Richmond Road at Jefferson. You also see that there is high ridership on most of these. This one here is an example of when I talked about right-of-way and not sure if we could even put a shelter here. The Richmond Road at Hampton Inn, as you can see, there is not a shelter or any amenities at this location. The Richmond Road at Richmond Hall. Jamestown Road at Lemon Hall. Trayburn Drive at Sterling Manor, and then my last one, Ironbound Road at Salvation Army. Again, this is the one where we're looking at equitable. If people are going to the Salvation Army, and if they want to take the bus route, we want them to be as comfortable as they can at that bus stop. So next steps for Tier 2. We want to, again, conduct engineering and have a discussion, determine if there is space for a shelter, determine the type of shelter, consider a solar shelter where applicable. And the solar shelter is more of a small bench that's connected to a pole. And I must say, Michelle and I've had this conversation, there are some really cool examples of solar, you probably have already seen them, some shelters that just use solar and that are really, I think, fantastic. So we do want to share those with you at some point to get your opinion. There's trash receptacles and benches we need to look at, and then consider ADA accessibility. Currently, this is the new design at the top that WADA uses for their shelters. So this is at the Earth Fair. A potential shelter design could be this here. This is something that's in the Hampton Roads region that I believe some of you have looked at before and thought it looked okay for the city. Looking at cost, we've talked to WADA and looked at what the cost is for their shelters and their trash receptacles and also their benches. And the costs are here, trash receptacles around $600, bench and trash receptacle install is $6,100, a full shelter install is $20,000, and what is variable is the ADA accessibility. Now, this is the cost for the design that you saw that was the black design. This is not the cost for the design at the bottom. We're still working on getting that cost. So I just wanted to note that. That's this cost here. So if we just go with Tier 1, estimating, and this is looking at real time, it's not simply 5 times whatever that top graph is. It's actually looking at each stop and what was needed. And so this $133,500 is a cost for Tier 1. The current stops with all amenities to be consistent with the new standard for all 14, for the 14 that already have all of the amenities. If we want to improve those amenities, and if you say, okay, we want the city to have the same stops throughout, bringing those up to standard would be $373,800. Then showing tier 2, these are the 20 stops, and I didn't show all 20, but these are the 20 stops if we want to meet our 39 goal, which is our 70%. Does not include labor or ADA accessibility. It's around $876,000. Have any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Certainly a lot there to unpack, but
Yes.
first I want to thank you and Mr. Novak and Ms. Williams and Clark and Ms. DeWitt for all the work that they put into getting us this information, because it is true that I think this council sees it as a priority to provide shelter at the bus stops. It's, well, I haven't done it, but I've seen people standing in the rain and snow, and you know, it's just not the quality of life that I think we aspire for those that ride public transportation. And so I applaud staff and council for approving the CIP, which begins to fund some of these projects. And so I look forward to moving forward. It's more expensive than I thought.
I know. I thought the same thing.
Because clearly, for me personally, I like the updated, as you called it, shelter, but certainly think that getting something out there is better than nothing. And so the standard WADA shelter is certainly adequate. But I also see and appreciate that you said you'd be working with the ARB to kind of talk about these shelters and designs. I can see that certain locations may have different designs depending on that location. You know, the vision out by the new sports center coming, there might be a shelter that looks like a pickleball racket. I don't know. But that would be kind of fun to see. I had a question, but it'll come back to me. So I'll go to Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin and the entire team for this detailed report. Just for the record, I prefer the updated look as well.
Okay.
And I think we were all stunned by the price of these, but again, it's an initiative that this council felt was extremely important. Two quick questions. In your discussions with Governor's Inn, would they be willing to install the shelter that under the new guidelines, or if we changed whatever the ARB comes up, or under the current design? Was that in the discussion?
No, that was not a part of the discussion. They seemed to not care about the design. They just wanted to know where we wanted it.
Okay. And then the second part is, but if with the city installing these, are we also assuming the maintenance for these, or because there's some understanding with WADA that they would?
No, we haven't discussed that. I'm going to pivot that to Michelle or Mr. Trivett. It's Michelle.
Sure, happy to address that. The short answer is those details need to be worked out. WADA would be typically responsible for the bus stops, but this will add quite a bit of that inventory. So I think we'll have a discussion with them about moving forward, and they would be the first line, certainly, of maintenance, but the city, we're always going to make sure things look good.
Yeah, and just the point being, as we all realize, if we're addressing 70% of the stops in the city, that there should be some type of consideration on their part for maintaining them.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I can also say our other local government partners are looking to follow our lead on this. So y'all are doing a great job being the leader and getting these bus stops funded, and they're looking at a similar action.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is fantastic. I wasn't here for the last GIO, but good job, everyone, because this is something that's so critical, I think, to a community is making sure that our public transit and the what is around it is like the mayor said, indicative of what we expect, as the quality of life in our communities. So I think this is really critical. I want to kind of say that as you outlined sort of the process, I just was thinking that, yes, I agree that having, what was set out for first tier 1 and kind of addressing places that have some of it, but not all of it, and getting those up to the all amenities, first things first, seems to be a very logical first step. And then when it was going down to tier 2, thinking about how to prioritize within that tier, right? Because as you were showing, there's different landscapes, different places, different things to deal with. And so what I was thinking of is going forward, perhaps there might be a breakdown of tier 2 into at a certain point. Like you were saying, there are places where there might need to be more negotiation or kind of figuring out engineering of the space, where perhaps some of these other tier 2 places, it's not nearly as complicated. So I would think that going forward, looking at how we can most efficiently move through those tier 2s based on really when can we, it's always like what's most expedient. Not that we don't want to do a great job, but really in terms of how can we make sure that we are moving as efficiently as possible to getting all amenities in as many places as we can. So knowing that tier 2 spaces are going to be very different from one another. Like you said, the Jefferson versus over here on Henry Street, those are very different. So thank you for that, and thank you for you and everyone on the team for thinking strategically about this, because I was rode public transportation for so very long, and so I know, except in Chicago where they have the human toasters. So when you were talking about solar, I was thinking about standing under the bus stops where they would turn on the heat in the wintertime. I don't think that I don't think we really need to go that far here. Thankfully, that doesn't really factor in. But all of this is being said is that it really is so important to just show that we are taking care of everyone. So thank you, and I look forward to kind of how it develops, especially with tier 2, how we can prioritize and move forward with the different spaces that we have. And when it comes down to the design, I'm not sure yet. So which one. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for this work, and I'd also like to applaud you for your first slide, Connecting with the World, because we often talk about the GIOs, and this really puts it front and center, and I think we often forget how all of the initiatives that we work on are tied back to those GIOs. So I really appreciate this one, and particularly Connecting with the World. And secondly, I think this is a perfect example of how important data is. I don't understand data and how it all is pulled together, but I am thankful to Mr. Novak, your intern, and Harrison for all the work and that you and Michelle put together on this, and then taking all of those numbers and data and putting it into something that is fairly comprehensive and easy for us to understand. And I too agree with, tackling those where there's sort of the low-hanging fruit that need just, say, the bench and the shelter. For me, those would be the highest priority. If I was at a bus stop, would be what I would consider. As far as design, my first inclination is to the HRT one. To me, that is reminiscent of what Colonial Williamsburg installed on Henry Street. But at the same time, I like your idea of looking at other examples and things that we might not even be aware of, and take advantage of ARB and perhaps include the Williamsburg Public Art Council. There might be opportunities and places that we could spiff it up a little bit or make things different. And solar, I'm all in favor of solar. One thing that hit me was sort of the opposite of what Stacy was saying, is taking into account how hot some areas are, because some places get more solar attention than others, and so that might be another factor to consider when we get to tier 2 as far as shelters, is which ones get the most direct sunlight during the day. And as far as the pricing, you had down there, complete shelter, $20,000. So that is, so if we were going to do something that didn't have any amenities, I guess it's, the shelter itself is 20,000, then the trash receptacles 600, and then the benches
That's correct.
is an additional. So, yes, a little bit on the higher side, but
Yes.
it's something very important I think we should follow through on.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll echo all the notes of appreciation, Director Griffin, thank you, and to you too, Michelle, and obviously Mr. Novak, who actually just shot a quick note too to say thanks to him and Harrison for putting this together, because I too have seen people, standing sometimes with grocery bags in hand or the backpack from work on with, who knows what heavy stuff in it, that just waiting for the bus, and I'm sure, a spot to throw away trash or a bench would be very helpful for them. My main takeaways were, one, I thought that differentiation on priority was done very well. I think ridership and then just amenities are really top two for me, and the others are lower because that's how we're going to most quickly affect people who are affected by this and will be positively. I think, well, similarly, I'll share, was surprised at high cost. I have a question. I don't know how many opportunities to this there will be, but I want to commend the Castle Development team doing Governor's Inn on their willingness to, as a third party, provide the bus stop that's nearest Highland Park. It struck me like some of the other locations are near private businesses or residential communities themselves, and I'd be curious if we have or if we could reach out to them for their willingness to contribute, whether that's cost sharing, maybe even fully taking on the cost or just doing that partially. Merrimack Crossing stuck out for me. It looks like they had a concrete pad for the bus stop, but no bench. And city could take care of the structure if they could take care of the bench. But CNF Bank was another one, and then there were a few that stuck out as being close to an entity which may want to provide that asset for either foot traffic that's nearby or the actual residences themselves. Have we broached that topic at all, or is that a little bit in the future?
We broached that topic as a team, and that was what that discussion meant. So engineering and discussion with the adjacent property owners, I probably should have said, but that's what we were talking about.
I think we're also hoping that through publicizing this effort, we get some community action groups interested, because in the past, there have been a couple times when they have donated benches and things like that. And so I think that partnership is very possible.
Yeah. All right. Well, overall, thank you. Excited to move forward, and it sounds like it's not yet decision-making time on exactly what what the structure will be, or solar or no solar. But I'll look forward to review them. We have all the options.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Well, just some of the question
You
that I
remembered your
forgot was kind of, Caleb kind of reminded me. I know the
Yes.
federal government helps supports our WADA funding. Is there an opportunity for any grants? Great
There's
project
probab-
for a development director in the city, but
There probably is, we have not explored that yet, but we will.
good, yeah. All right, we're looking forward to getting more on that. Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Griffin.
you're welcome.
Okay, next is council communications. If any member of council has anything they'd like to share.
Well, the only thing I would like to share is a reminder that next week is Juneteenth, and I've been on the committee for William & Mary's, and theirs will be on the 18th, and there's information on the website, and then the consortium has a lot of different activities planned, and information is on their website. And I think Jim Joseph sent out the notice today on that, too.
And I'll add, just having gotten the email today, CW has programming from the 15th to 25th, so they
Right.
have a lot significantly as well.
And Williamsburg Live is right around the corner as well.
Right.
What's the date on that, Ian?
21st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Good. Hopefully, we'll see everybody out there. Anything over here? Next is open forum, which is an opportunity for anybody to come forward. I saw a hand earlier, but I think they left. Seeing none, we'll close the open forum, and I believe we have some matters for closed session, Mr. Vice Mayor.
We do. I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one personnel matter per subparagraph 1 concerning appointments to boards and commissions, and one legal matter per subparagraph 7 for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members, consultants, or attorneys pertaining to actual or probable litigation concerning a contract action.
Second?
Okay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, we will go into closed session and reconvene when we're finished. Thank you. Vice Mayor.
I move to approve the certification of a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia.
Ms. McKay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, if there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay,
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.